generations to come.
Welcome to the Thoroughbred Daily News Writers Room podcast. My name is Bill Finley. I'm a correspondent for the Thoroughbred Daily News and also the co-host of the Down the Stretch radio show on Sirius XM Radio with Dave Johnson.
How y'all doing? I'm Randy Moss with NBC Sports. Clearly not in my home office, no ocean and palm trees in the great state of Minnesota, but ready to roll.
Where are you? Are you in Miami, Randy?
I am still in Miami. Yes, I am. There are worse places to be on a January afternoon.
You poor thing. All right, I'm Zoe Cadman with Santa Anita and First Racing. I am not at home either. I am in St. Mary's, Georgia, of all places you could be in the world, and it is absolutely gorgeous here.
Well, guys, obviously the big story of the weekend was the Pegasus and the very imposing, very impressive win by White Abarrio, who won the Pegasus by 6 1/4 lengths. In just a few seconds in the Gainesway Guest of the Week segment, we'll be hearing from his trainer, Saffie Joseph Jr. And we last week dissected the race and looked at it, handicapped it. I picked Saudi Crown. I'm not saying I'm at all shocked that White Abarrio won the race. Obviously, he's a very good horse. But to me, as a handicapper and racing fan, Randy, he's still hard to figure. I mean, some days he runs races like this and you think this is, a horse of the ages. But yet he came into this race off a pretty dull second in the Mr. Prospector. There's been other races, whether with Rick Dutrow or with Saffie Joseph Jr., where he just didn't run a step. So when he's good, he's very, very good. I think right now he's obviously the best horse in the United States, but he's not always so good. So what did you make of his chances going into the race? And are you a little bit surprised, not that he won, but that he just destroyed this field?
I've kind of felt the same about him as you just elaborated on, Bill. I think it was a widely held opinion that if White Abarrio ran up to his potential, ran back to the best races of his career in the Whitney and in the Breeders' Cup Classic, that he would probably win. He would almost certainly win. But that was back in 2023. We had, you had a horse in Saudi Crown who was coming off a sharp win in good time at the fairgrounds, who I thought was almost a cinch to control the pace, which he did, who would be on the rail, which he was, whereas White Abarrio, 2-path, best case scenario, maybe even the 3-path, so he was going to lose some ground vis-a-vis Saudi Crown. And then he had Locked, who had a poor post position, but was coming off a win in the Cigar Mile and looked to be on an upward trajectory. But we saw White Abarrio bounce back to the same form that he had in the summer of 2023, and all credit to Saffie Joseph and company.
He was amazing. He really was. There's really not a whole lot to say about White Abarrio. He said it all on the racetrack. I was all in on Locked, who I thought he ran such a courageous race. He missed the break completely. He was wide. He ate dirt. He did everything that he's never done before and fought very, very bravely indeed. Now, had he broke better, maybe it was a different outcome. I don't think so. I don't think anybody was beating White Abarrio on that day, but Locke certainly threw his hat in, and he's going to be a major force throughout the year. And again, he proved that you can't win from the 11 post, but he really did try very, very hard indeed. So I don't believe he lost anything in defeat, but a massive kudos to Locke. I mean, Casper here likes him too. Isn't he cute?
We've talked so much about having fierceness in Sierra Leone back this year as 4-year-olds, which is going to be huge. And now we got a couple more to talk about, Bill, and White Abarrio and Locke.
Well, I'll give you one that we're probably not going to be talking about much, at least not in a positive. Either one is Zoe, Randy. What the heck is going on with Mystic Dan? He has not been the same horse since the Preakness. And once again, with no apparent excuses, he didn't run a step. I talked to Kenny McPeak, and I give him credit for not coming up with, the track was too cuppy, he didn't like it, kind of nonsense excuses. He says, I have no idea what's going on. Everything looks good to me. This horse just isn't running right now. He said that maybe the answer is to drop him into an easier race and see if he could win a grade 3 or something like that, and maybe, go from there. But anybody got any theories on why he is having such a hard time?
Nope.
Nope.
No theory. All I can say is that we've seen this before, and probably 2 times out of every three, when you have a horse like Mystic Dan, a Kentucky Derby winner, who runs a series of bad races, the next move seems to be retirement. So, I mean, we'll see what happens with him, but it had to be an extremely disappointing race for him.
That's the thing about winning the Derby. He was the best horse on that day. And that seems to have been it. He was the recipient of a brilliant ride. Good horse. You can never, ever take that away from him. But he's going to have to find his form. Otherwise, you're correct. He'll be in the breeding shed. And, let's just hope they don't leave it too long. Do you know what I mean? Because so often we've seen what's happened with Rich Strike. Then you can't get a stud deal and it takes forever. So these are things that you need to jump on right away. The breeding season starts on Valentine's Day, February the 14th.
So while everyone's been talking about the Pegasus, the road to the Kentucky Derby also had a stop Saturday at Oakland Park in the Pegasus Stakes. I love Oakland Park. It's a grade 3 prep for a prep with a $1 million purse. It's just amazing what's going on. And the winner was a horse by the name of Speed King, trained by Ron Moquette. But the horse, I think you guys will agree with me, that really was the best horse in the race, with no contest, was Sandman. And if you remember the week earlier, we were talking about T.D. Thornton's top 10 for his first installment of it. He had Sandman listed second. And me, Mr. Snarky, said, Sandman second? I've never even heard of that horse. Okay, TD, good job, pal. You nailed one there. I've heard of him now. Zoe, that was an unbelievably good race. I thought even though in defeat, it was the best race I've seen from a 3-year-old this year. I mean, he had just an absolutely terrible start. He kind of was in a tangle and stumbled. And by the time he straightened out, he was 7-8 lengths behind the rest of the field, closed really well to finish second. The race is a little bit longer. He might have won. The other story, Patch Adams at 4-5, no good at fourth. Zoe, what did you think?
Well, I mean, if you look at the pictures of the white horse, Sandman, leaving the gate there, if you just watch the actual replay, it doesn't look so bad. But you can see the rider completely off the horse, gets back on the horse, and he basically had the exact same trip as Locked had, overcame an awful lot early to finish up strongly late. So that was him. Now, it was pretty much the same thing with Patch Adams. He didn't break good either. And I'm not sure too many people caught that. He stumbled. He was right at the same place that Sandman was. And I watched this race over and over again because for some reason, I'm like, is that really Pratt on that horse? Because he didn't look like Flavian for 1 minute aboard Patch Adams. So not only did he break badly, had a horrible trip, at the 8th pole, the horse came over on him. He clipped heels. He almost went down at the 8th pole. Patch Adams ran a better race than you think he ever did. Like, I'm going to say that he ran as good a race as Sandman, if not better.
Well, you talk about a race that changed complexions from the starting gate to the run around the first turn. The 3 favorites in the Southwest were Patch Adams at 4-5, Gaming at 2-1, and then Sandman at 6-1. They were the only 3 horses that weren't double digits on the board. And Sandman, I don't know if he tried to prop or almost looked like he tried to wheel for a second. I don't know, but he just lurched badly to the inside, and you saw what happened to him. And I agree. I mean, Patch Adams was compromised by stumbling at the start, and Gaming was completely wiped out twice going into and going around the first turn. He lost all chance. They were 7th, 8th, and 9th in a 9-horse field going around the first turn. Meanwhile, we haven't talked about the winner of the Southwest, Speed King, who was left alone on the front end in very manageable fractions, the first quarter mile, 24.11. Who ran the best race of his career, took a big step forward to go wire to wire. Buyer speed figure that race 93. I have a concern about Speed King at longer distances than a mile and 16th, right? He's from the first crop of stallion Volatile, who was a son of Medaglia d'Oro. He wasn't necessarily bred to be a pure sprinter, but Volatile never ran around 2 turns. He was a very, very fast horse. It remains to be seen what kind of a stamina influence he'll be on his offspring. But Sandman was pretty much eating up the ground on Speed King in the last part of the Southwest. So I've got a question in my mind, certainly about Speed King at 1.25 miles, and even as we go down the road, maybe at 1.8 miles.
The TDN Writers Room is brought to you by Keeneland. Keeneland's September grad Citizen Bull was named the Eclipse champion 2-year-old male Thursday night at the Breakers in Palm Beach. Randy, you were there. I'm sure you were cheering him on along with NBC and their Eclipse Award once more. So I hope you had fun there. Keeneland September graduate Moira was named Eclipse champion female turf horse, and 3 other Eclipse champions paved their road to the championship with Grade 1 wins at Keeneland. Top 3-year-old male Sierra Leone won the Grade 1 Toyota Bluegrass. Top 2-year-old filly Immersive won the Grade 1 Dali Alcibiades. And the champion dirt female Idiomatic won the Grade 1 Juddmonte Spinster. We'll be right back after this message from Keeneland.
Leslie's Rose, Sierra, Leone.
Mike, $5 million. Thank you. Thank you.
Carl Spackler, Immersive. She feels pretty. Hup!
This week's Fastest Horse of the Week brought to you by Timberlake, one of the fast sires at Windstar Farm. Timberlake won the Champagne as a 2-year-old, won his debut by 9.5 lengths, so you know he was precocious. He beat Fierceness, the 2-year-old champ, in the Champagne. He was also named the TDN Silver Value Sire this year among all the new recruits at stud. He ran big speed figures as a racehorse, but you have to hurry at a fee of $20,000. There are limited seasons remaining for Timberlake at Windstar Farm. Now, this week's Fastest Horse of the Week, we don't have to talk much about this because we've talked at length about him already. Drum roll, please. White Abarrio, a 109 Buyer's speed figure, getting back to form in winning the Pegasus World Cup last Saturday.
Welcome in now the Gainesway Guest of the Week. Who else could it be this week besides Saffie Joseph? Not only won the Pegasus World Cup with White Abarrio, won 2 other stakes races at Gulfstream. And Saffie, welcome and thanks for joining us. And your horse has been a little bit up and down throughout his career, both with you and with Rick Dutrow. Matter of fact, he was coming into this race off a second place finish in the Mr. Prospector Stakes. Leading up to the Pegasus World Cup, what signs was he giving you? Did you know that he was going to run this kind of just huge hole-in-the-wind race?
I mean, you never know he's going to run that good. You hope always for them to run that well, but most of the time it doesn't happen. We thought he was sitting on a race that was close to a race that should be good enough to win it if everything went well. And the most important thing for us was that he was going to need to break better. I mean, he didn't break better in both of his races. The allowance, it wasn't really picked up on that much because it was a small field, but obviously in the Mr. Prospector, you saw how important, and it compromised him a lot.
So, Saffie, I see the math wizard saddle towel hanging in the background there. We covered the Pennsylvania Derby when you won that race, when your first, almost like your breakout win. And then we had your first Breeders' Cup win as well on NBC. How much did it add to the victory for White Abarrio for you that you've been through so much with this horse? Back to Churchill Downs in 2023 when the horse was given to Rick Dutrow and now came back to you. How does that factor in with the emotions, in the victory?
Yeah, it's a wild event that did we ever think we were going to lose him under the circumstances we went through at Churchill? No, but we understood that when he had to, our status in New York was in limbo. They were kind of holding us hostage in a way because it shouldn't have been in that way, but it was what it is. And we knew we had to give up the horse. So that was a reasonable part. And then you give up the horse, he goes on and he wins the Whitney in the Classic. It's a horse that you had. I mean, you're thankful for the owners and the horse, but would you have liked to have been in that position to do it? Yes. And would he have won the Whitney in the Classic with us? Probably not, because we might have not gone that route. So everything in life happens for a reason. And then, did you ever envision that we were going to get the horse back? No. I mean, how could you envision a horse wins a Whitney in a classic and he's going to come back to you? So the mystery of life is so perplexing. And when we got the horse back and they called, and Mark called me and said, "Hey, we're going to send the horse back to you," it meant a lot, because in other words, it feels like, hey, these owners, they believe in me, and that gave you confidence. And that meant a lot more to me than anything. Then losing the horse, I knew I had to give up the horse. The writing was on the wall. We were to jeopardize the horse's career, basically, if he stayed with me. So, but getting the horse back, that came from out of nowhere. I never in my mind even wanted a horse back, because it was like you were in a situation where there was nothing to gain. And he had already won a Grade 1, he sent the winner. And then, like, I at that time, I wasn't in a mental capacity to even have a horse back like that. I mean, it took me a long time to kind of heal or get over it, like, just mentally. And I can't put into words how it all unfolded. So it's kind of like it was scripted and we just part of the process.
Wow.
So you get the horse back. He wins his comeback race for you, and you've handled him with kid gloves. You really have. You're on top of the world. You run him in the Mr. Prospector, probably not his best distance, and he gets beat at odds on. How are you feeling that day, knowing everything you'd already gone through with the horse, and he gets beat as the overwhelming favorite? Did you just turn the page and be like, yeah, no worries, we're going to go on to the Pegasus?
So the Pegasus was, we were trying to get to the Pegasus as best as we could. Going into the Mr. Prospector, I thought we were sitting on a winner. I thought he was fit enough, he was well enough, and that he would win. Obviously, it's a race, and I've learned over times that don't take anything for granted, and horses get beat. So I never think that I'm going to win a race. I always hope to win a race. I thought everything was on track for him to win the race. Circumstantial wise, now he got beat. So there's disappointment, he got beat, but then you start to analyze, and we knew he missed the break. We knew he took a ton of dirt. He split horses, things that he does not like. I think going a shorter distance, he could overcome those kind of things where he doesn't really test his stamina as much. But that's circumstances that he normally doesn't run his race when that happens. So to see him run that good, we were happy. And then we started to analyze the figures, and we waited for the buyer to come back. It came back 95, but it doesn't take the trip into account. And then once the rag came back and he ran a 6, we were like, okay, everything's kind of aligning, because he ran a 6 in the allowance. He ran a 6 in the Mr. Prospector. And basically it was similar to what he did before he broke through in 23. So we felt like everything started to align, and then we worked him back after the Mr. Prospector. And that work was a half-mile work with a strong gallop out. That work was electrifying. He worked in 47 and change, which is okay. Went out the 5/8 in a minute, which is just, you would say, okay too. But then he went out the next quarter again in 24 and change, and he went out 7 and 124. He never worked like that in his life since I had him. So after that, we felt like we were sitting on a horse that was ready to fire his best shot, and he needed to break, and that was going to be the important thing.
Mm-hmm. Saffie, has the schedule now been set? Presumably you were going to the Saudi Cup, but I haven't seen you say or haven't read in print that that's a definite. So tell us about what's ahead for him, not just in the next month or two, but kind of other, besides the Breeders' Cup Classic, other goals you have for him this season.
Well, the goals right now that's in the ownership group. That's outside of my hands. They're going to talk this week as far as if they're going to go to Saudi or if he's going to stay here. I mean, no decisions been made yet. Before the race, he didn't even have an invitation to Saudi. They didn't put him on the invitation list. It's now been aware that we do have an invitation after the Pegasus, and the ownership groups are going to talk it over, the Cornets and the Prince, and they're going to come up with a decision by the end of the week on what he does. So nothing's finalized yet. It's possible, but it's not. Nothing is finalized just yet. As far as if he stayed here in America, tentatively the plans would be try to win the Met Mile. That would be a goal with the Whitney and the Classic. And that's what I would think they would want to do. I don't want to speak out of turn, basically, but that's what I think. If he did stay here, it would be something like that with a start before the Met Mile.
So possibly key in this situation, you mentioned the Prince. It's Prince Faisal, who is a member of the royal family of Saudi Arabia. Prince Faisal bought into White Abarrio a minority share before last year's Saudi Cup, just for the purposes of having a horse in the Saudi Cup. He's still a minority owner. But last year, Saffie, it wasn't with you, it was with Rick Dutrow. But the horse ran poorly. He finished 10th in the Saudi race, beaten 15 lengths. Do you know anything about what transpired there that might have led White Abarrio to run that kind of a race?
No, I don't know anything. I know it was a long ship. He had to ship from California to Florida, stay on the plane for like 6 hours, and then to Saudi. The horse hasn't been as a younger horse, especially just knowing him from his history, he was never the best shipping horse. I mean, if you watch in New York, he won the Whitney. He was based in New York. Then after the Whitney, he went to California and he became based in California. So he wasn't for say shipping for those races. He became like well acclimatized.
Okay.
So you add in that ship from California to Saudi, where he had to stop in Florida for that whole time on the plane, 11 days before a race. It probably took a toll on him. I mean, obviously he showed that he it wasn't the class that beat him. He just didn't fire his best shot, and it came back and he ran similar in the Met Mile after that. So that kind of the trip took a toll on him mentally, and he needed to freshen up, and he did, and he came back and showed that he's just as good as ever, or if not better. I mean, I think he ran like a 1.5 on the rag, which is way over the super fast. I don't think many horses run that kind of figure for a long, long time.
So that's White Abarrio. You run first with White Abarrio. You run third with Skippy Longstocking. Talk to us about Skippy and what a dude he is. Is he 7 or is he 8? Seems like he's been around.
He and Abarrio are 6. They're the same age. We've had them kind of from 2-year-olds. Well, obviously Abarrio we didn't have for a period, but we had both of them from 2-year-olds. And to see them stay sound and healthy and be at top form, that means a lot to us. As I said, Skippy was always under the radar. And when we didn't have Abarrio, Skippy he made us whole. He was our horse and he carried us, and like he held the ship up. Abarrio won the Whitney, obviously for Rick, and then Skippy won our Charlestown Classic for us. It was not the same prestige, but it was $1 million purse. So he was lifting up our spirits during that time, and he's just a cool horse. That was his 3rd year running in the Pegasus. The first time he ran 7th, that was the same year Abarrio ran it. And then last year he got eased, basically got pulled up. So to see him come back and run a good race from a tough post again, I was very happy with his performance. And he's just an ultra consistent horse that tries so hard, and just an overachiever.
Where would he be showing up next? Yeah,
so what's worked well for him each year after the Pegasus, I mean, when he wasn't coming off good races, was the Tampa Bay Challenger. It's a grade 3. It's only 100,000, but it's kind of like been a stepping stone for the rest of the year. And last year it worked. We were able to go there off of a bad performance, win it, and then give us some confidence to go to the Oakland Handicap where he ran huge. So I would kind of like to stick to the same plan. It's almost like you already know the route already. It is tempting to California does have a grade 1, and he's never had a grade 1, and it kind of tempts me.
Shipper, right?
Yeah, he's a very good shipper. He ships. He ships nonstop. So it does tempt me to try to go to that race. It's a 1.25 miles, which I think you'll love. It's a grade 1, and I would love to add a grade 1 to his resume, because I just feel like he deserves it. He's run fast enough figures to win a grade 1 on his right day, and that is tempting. But I don't know. We got to talk it over the ownership group and see what we want to do. The main goal is the Oakland Handicap. It's $1.2 million. It's a big purse for a horse like him to try to repeat.
Saffie, usually the unsung heroes of these stories don't get a lot of mention. The backstretch people, the grooms, the exercise riders. And I first caught this on your interview on NBC, and then later you and I talked the next day for a Thoroughbred daily news story. But you said that your groom, Lalo Diaz, is a huge part of his success, and that you're not even sure that this horse could be where he is today without him. Tell him Lalo's story, and why has he been what you consider a big factor in the success of White Abarrio?
I think when you find just like they have jockeys, they have trainers, they have horses. I think there's talented grooms, they're talented horsemen, and when you find one that really loves and has a passion, they're hard to duplicate, and that's what he has. He has, apart from being a really good groom, his whole personality, just in general as a person, is the same. He's very level-headed, very even-keeled, never too high, never too low, and that energy, I'm a strong believer it feeds off the horses. You see horses and they have nervous grooms and they're nervous. And you see horses that have calm grooms and they calm the horses. So he's a groom, like if you would say like you're going to a top rider, when I have a horse with him, I feel like I don't even have to look at him, tell him anything. I feel like he's just clutch. Every time he delivers, his horses always look immaculate. You never see a horse that he grooms doesn't have the right like skin color shine to their coat. I mean, we have horses sometimes with some grooms, and you figure like, oh, it's the horse. You can't get him to look well, but it's like with him, it's like always perfection. And he's done so well for us as a groom. He's won most of our grade ones for us, and sometimes horses end up getting good with him. And I've just seen it over and over, and I can't thank him enough. And the grooms they're a big part to horses' success. They're just as important as a trainer, I believe. And same thing with an exercise rider. You got a good groom and an exercise rider, you basically don't need anything else. You don't even need a trainer for say, because the horse is going to get himself there, and that's what you need. The groom and the exercise rider, and Vincente who gets on him, he's a huge part to him too. So we're just thankful to have a good team, and that's what you need in racing. It's so everybody needs to do their part. It's like a puzzle, and if one piece is missing or one piece doesn't have the right vibe, it's not going to happen.
Don't be talking yourself out of a job now, Saffie.
No, I'm realistic that the more success I've had with horses, the more you realize that the horse is the important. It's all about the horse, and then you can mess the horse up, but you can't make the horse what he's not. And the trainers are overrated job as far as that's the truth of the matter. And I've learned that as I get more success, the trainer is very overrated. It's about the horse, and you have to take care of the horse. And once the horse is on the right line, anybody can kind of keep the horse on that line. Now, if the horse comes off the line and he loses his form, then you may need to tweak some things, and some people may not. But as far as that, I mean, it's all about the horse in reality. There's no two ways about it. And I've become a stronger and stronger and stronger believer that as I've gone about.
Oh, I've always told Jerry Bailey that about jockeys, but I've never heard a trainer actually come out and say that about your profession. So we focused on Saturday for good reason, but you also had a hell of a Thursday night when Soul of an Angel won the Eclipse Award for champion female sprinter, the winner of the Breeders' Cup Filly Mare Sprint. And it had been said, whether or not you go to Saudi Arabia with White Abarrio, that Soul of an Angel was likely to go because the Saudi Cup is a one-turn mile and an eighth. Can you update us on the plans for Soul of an Angel?
Yeah, her plans are in limbo right now because last week they called and said she was going to have an invitation. And then after this weekend, they've told us she's fourth reserve. So I don't understand how it's gone up in limbo like that. So obviously the ownership group wasn't pleased to hear that. We've been able to try to get information, and we haven't been able to get any more information. That's all we know right now is that she's fourth reserve. And from last week, then calling and saying, have her ready. She's likely to have an invitation. And not even to say we're first reserve, fourth reserve is a big difference. So we're just waiting to see what happened, trying to get more information. Mark Cornett's been trying to get more up to date, but we haven't been able to get that information just yet. If she didn't go to Saudi, I would say she would go to the Madison. There's nothing really for her say at the moment. There's Gulfstream, there's a 6.5 for grade 3 in March, but it's a bit too short. Maybe just freshen her to the Madison. But right now she's training still towards the Saudi Cup, and we would hope to know more in the next couple of days.
Hey, Saffie, the royal family is a part owner of White Abarrio. Have Prince Faisal put in a good word for Soul of an Angel over there.
Yeah, we like it, Senator. I mean, we think her style kind of suits that race. They go at a rapid pace, and it normally suits a kind of closer for say. So we would like to give her a chance if possible.
Saffie, I don't want to go too far with this because maybe it's a subject left for a better day. But since we have you, I want to get your take on the current situation in Florida, the threats, quote, air quote, threats that the racetrack will be closed down within 3 years. What do you make of the situation? How worried are you about the future of racing in South Florida? And what do you think are some of the solutions to what is a very serious problem?
It is a concern. I try not to worry because I always believe things are going to work out the way they're supposed to work out. But we also have to stand up for ourselves, and to see how it was said in the meeting. I don't think the right things were said, and then Aiden obviously came back to fix up what was said, and then I've heard after Belinda echoed some statements on an interview. So I think what needs to happen is dialogue needs to happen, and just making all these kind of statements, you need to have dialogue behind closed doors and find out what everybody wants. And there needs to be a middle ground met, because there is a future for racing in South Florida. And that part about having tracks not in an urban location, I mean, I strongly disagree. I think that's how racetracks should be in urban locations, because then you have access to fans and more people will be able to come to the races easier. You put a track in the middle of nowhere, who's going to go to it? So I know Gulfstream's on a valuable piece of property, and that's probably one of the things. And I have no problem if we were to move the show somewhere else. What I have a problem with is that they want to decouple, and when you want to decouple, there's no racetrack that has decoupled and still races. So telling us to decouple and to accept it's suicide, and it makes no sense. And our board did not represent us properly, because they never even told us what was going on. I mean, the horsemen. So we were misrepresented, and they've all kind of held their hand up after that and kind of said or made excuses and tried to make it better after that. It's like you having a bad. That's how I try to explain it to somebody who doesn't really understand decoupling. It's like me and you playing basketball, and I tell you I'm going to retire. And you say, okay, well, congrats, go ahead. And then I tell you, no, I'm going to take the basketball, and you can't play anymore either. And then I take that basketball and I sell it for a lot of money and allow somebody else to play. And that's what it is. Horse racing, the slots were subsidized for racing to help racing. So they want us to decouple, and then they want to take the slot license basically and use it to build a property, and we get nothing out of it. And that's not right. So I believe we need to have chats, we need to have dialogue, and we need to get this ship sailing in order. And that's what racing needs in general. We need leadership. We lack leadership. Obviously, we got HIU in place now for the medication ruling, which is good. I mean, they've been having things that they need to work on, obviously. But overall leadership, as far as our industry, building our sport and growing our growth and growing our handle, we don't have that. And I think this has got people nationwide talking about the racing industry. Racing is thankfully enough to have a lot of smart business people in it. And hopefully some of our owners would step up and come together and make it right. And that's what I think we need in general to grow our sport. I think we've plateaued where we don't put enough to grow our sport, and we're our own downfall.
Very good. Well, Saffie, thanks so much for an enlightening interview. Congratulations on just that huge day at Saturday at Gulfstream to win the Pegasus World Cup plus 2 other stakes races. Good luck getting back to the winner's circle, whether that's in Saudi Arabia or someplace else with White Abarrio. And thanks once again for being our guest on the Gainesway Guest of the Week show.
Thank you very much. Take care.
And Mr. Saffie Joseph came to you courtesy of Gainesway. Saffie, of course, trained not only White Abarrio, he had a horse called Drain the Clock, who was a Grade 1 winning sprinter. You may remember Drain the Clock as the horse that was the very first to beat Jackie's Warrior in a one-turn race. That was the Woody Stevens at Belmont Park. Drain the Clock also won the Bayshore and the Swale. And here's a quote from pedigree expert Alan Porter. Drain the Clock is an imposing physical that fits the mold of what breeders are looking for. And you can look for Drain the Clock's first yearlings later this summer. He stands at Gainesway for just $10,000. Gainesway, power, passion, performance.
Drain the Clock will win and win by as much as he wants.
Drain the Clock will bound home the winner. Drain the Clock, Jackie's Warrior, Drain the Clock by a head.
$120,000. $100,000 to the back.
He's all class, this champion, Marla.
And he's launched on the outside here with a great turn of foot.
Palace Pier, Palace Pier.
Space Blues, Space Blues.
Space Blues.
He's danced every dance, he's an incredibly sound horse. After every run, he always comes back for more.
He's a true Tabawi that goes out there and he gives everything.
Well, it's time for this week's News You Can Use segment, brought to you by Darley, where we take a look at goings-on of racing, breeding, etc. in Europe with one of our TDN European editors, Emma Berry. And it's that time of year, both in our side of the Atlantic Ocean and your side of the Atlantic Ocean, where the sales are coming up, everybody's breeding, breeding season, etc. So who are the current hot stallions right now in Europe, Emma?
Well, sort of underneath that tier of proven elite sires that probably everyone is well aware of, you know, we've obviously got Dubawi, Frankel, Siuni, Wharton Bassett, you know, that are, you know, at their absolute peak at the moment. We've had some really interesting younger stallions coming through. Three in particular, actually, who had their first crop of classic runners last year. Blue Point, who is a son of Shamadal, and Tudan Hot, a son of Dubawi. Both sort of really sort of made headlines last year with a first crop classic winner for each of them, in Fallen Angel for Tudan Hot and Rosalian for Blue Point. He's also the sire of Big Evs, who will be familiar to American listeners from, you know, his Breeders' Cup appearances. And also Study of Man has been a bit of a, well, I wouldn't say left field sort of entry, if you like, onto the stallion scene, but he's a son of Deep Impact, and he was a Prix du Jockey Club winner himself in France, and he's made a really interesting start at Landway Stud with quite small books, and he was the sire of Kalpana, who won on Champions Day last year, Group 1 winner for Juddmonte. So they've been three sort of really up-and-coming stallions here that I think, you know, everyone's well aware of them in Europe now, but they'd certainly be names to note for the future, because I think they have the look that their profile is only going to get bigger and bigger as they go along. And then we've, you know, got the excitement seems to start earlier and earlier each year for those stallions who have their first runners coming up. And already people are talking about, you know, what their 2-year-olds might be doing. We've got still a couple of months to go till the turf season even starts here. But, you know, with the breeze up sales, the 2-year-old sales being so influential now as well, you know, the guys involved in that are very professional, and they're already having quite a good handle on what stallions could be looking interesting to follow for this year ahead with their first 2-year-olds. We've actually got a number of, quite a large number of those coming through as well. There's Palace Pier, who's a multiple Group 1 winning miler for Darley. He's got his first 2-year-olds. I think you might see at least one of them racing over your way with Chad Brown. I believe he's got a half brother to Chindit, who is a good horse here. There's also a half brother to Cracksman, who is a multiple Group 1 winner as well by Palace Pier. Space Blues, good old Space Blues, who's a mighty racehorse, of course, Breeders' Cup mile winner. He'll have his first 2-year-olds coming up. And I was on a stallion tour in Ireland over the last few days, and I saw the lovely Starman, who's a great big horse. He was July Cup winner, really fast horse, but, very imposing. He covered a very big first book. He's got his 2-year-old runners coming up, and I think they're quite excited to see what they can do, the team at Tally-Ho Stud as well.
So, Emma, you mentioned Big Ev, who we're familiar with over here. There are some other names on the list of newly retired stallions that we're pretty familiar with here as well. Who are some of the ones you're looking forward to the most?
Well, again, another big intake coming through for this year. Certainly in Ireland, we've actually only got 3 new flat stallions in Britain this year, who are Bradsell, multiple Group 1 winning sprinter, Van Dijk, who will be featuring in TDN this week, and Isaac Shelby, who's at Newsall's Park Stud. In Ireland, a much bigger intake, and they include another horse I was lucky enough to see yesterday, Big Evs, who you just mentioned, who was looking, like he really already owned the stallion yard at Tally-Ho. He's certainly sort of enjoying showing off to breeders at the moment. And then, of course, slightly at the other end of the distance scale, we've got the last 2 Derby winners at Coolmore, August Rodin and, of course, City of Troy, who we heard so much about last season. They've been joined by Henry Longfellow. So they've got 3 new stallions there, as well as, Big Evs, Bucanero Fuerte, and the Mighty King of Steel at Tally-Ho. So those 2 studs, just those 2 in Ireland, have obviously got plenty going on. as well. And who else have we got that we should be mentioning? In France, of course, Big Rock and Charin, 2 Group 1 winning milers. They're going to be very interesting. The French scene's really sort of livening up again. They had a few quieter years, but they've got a nice intake of young stallions, including Pushkin as well, another Group 1 winner at Arrow de Beaumont. So there's I think it's a bit of a shame for Britain this year that there's such a sort of a quieter year on the new stallion front, but certainly France and Ireland are making up for that. There's sort of plenty for breeders have been, out and about on the various stallion trails in the last few months and last few weeks, I should say, and having a good look at all of those horses.
So Big Evs is one of my favorite horses, along with King of Steel. How do we, you've got they're 2 totally different kind of horses. Have you been to see King of Steel? How does he look now? Because he was just a big, massive, gorgeous horse.
Yeah, he really is. I mean, they're all at Tallyhostad, and where I was yesterday, in fact. And they are completely different physical types. Big Evs, despite his name, is actually quite a neat, compact horse, and he's got this great march about him. He doesn't look like a horse who thinks he's small. Let's put it that way. He comes out and he's got a great walk, and he just seems to have that great attitude. And King of Steel is imposing, that's for sure. But he's very well made. He's very well balanced and put together. So you would very much be considering the type of mares you'd send to each of those stallions. But you can't take away from King of Steel what he did on the track. He came so close to winning the Derby, and then was a brilliant winner. Later in the year, Frankie Dettori, great farewell for him in Britain in the Champion Stakes. So he's just he's a horse with a massive following, and he is big himself. But it'll be very interesting to see what his offspring are like in the next year.
Well, we want to thank Emma Barry, the European editor of the Thoroughbred Daily News, for news you can use, brought to you by Darley. Emma, thanks so much, and we look forward to catching up with you again soon, learning more about what's going on overseas. Thanks, Emma.
Thank you.
Thanks so much to Emma Barry. Well, you heard Emma Barry talk about some of the stallions with first-year 2-year-olds in Britain this year. They're including Palace Pier, whose offspring includes some connections to top horses with top trainers. It's no wonder Palace Pier's first book was so strong, and he now has 21 2-year-olds that are out of group winners. 7 of these are Group 1 winners, including Integral, Great Heavens, and Speedy Boarding. 26 2-year-olds that are siblings to group winners. 9 of these are Group 1 winners, including Cracksman, Anmat, Acclaim, Regional, and Light Infantry. 41 different known trainers, with the Gosdens and Willie Haggis having at least 4 2-year-olds apiece. It's going to be a very exciting year ahead indeed.
Well, let's get back to what's going on this weekend. And it's that time of year again. Just about every single Saturday afternoon, there's something going on the road to the Kentucky Derby. This week, the major races are the Holy Bull at Gulfstream Park, the Robert Lewis at Santa Anita. Aqueduct will also run the Withers Stakes. NBC, Randy, will be covering this, I believe.
We will. We'll have 8 races between Gulfstream Park and Santa Anita on CNBC and Peacock next Saturday.
All right. So let's start with the Holy Bull. It is a grade 3 with a purse of $265,000. Came up pretty weak this year. I suppose a lot of people will look at Ferocious as the horse to beat. And he is an interesting horse. In his first lifetime start, $1.3 million purchase at Ocala, he just looked fantastic, winning by 7 3/4 lengths. After that, he ran second in the Hopeful and second in the Breeders' Futurity, and then ran in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, ran a kind of lackluster 5th. Said the traffic on the turns is the comment line. I went back and watched the race. I didn't think he had a very bad trip at all. If he runs back to his very best, he would probably be the horse to beat in here for Gustavo Delgado, of course, the trainer of Mage from a few years ago. But he just doesn't look like he's ever really developed. Not only this year, we'll find out if he's developed as a 3-year-old, but he's never run better than his best race, which was his first race of his career with a 96 buyer. So I've got to look to try to beat him with someone else. And how about Burnham Square for Ian Wilkes. This looks like the up-and-coming horse. And Ian Wilkes really takes his time with his 2- and 3-year-olds. You don't see them, run out of the box and win by 5. This is a very typical Ian Wilkes horse. He's needed 3 starts to break his maiden. But on December 28th at Gulfstream, he broke his maiden. Not only broke his maiden, won by 9 and an 86 buyer figure. I think he can still improve. I'm going with Burnham Square to upset Ferocious and anyone else that might stand in his way.
Well, in my opinion, Bill, you've zeroed in on the 2 horses, certainly the ones that I like. I think the blinkers made a big difference to Burnham Square in his last race, and each one of his starts has gotten a little bit better. I will say this about Ferocious. As a 2-year-old, he showed inexperience and greenness in every one of his races, including the debut when he ran such a big number when he didn't break. Right? You can go race by race by race, and he did something wrong. And in my opinion, a lot of the problems that he was facing in his races look like, to me, they had something to do with him not being comfortable running in crowds of horses. I think that's what happened at Keeneland going into the first turn in the Breeders' Futurity when East Avenue crossed over in front of him and he shied and kind of flipped out a little bit and took himself back out of the race. And I think that's what was the case in the Breeders' Cup. In the Breeders' Cup going around the first turn, Javier Castellano took a hold of him. He was between horses and not comfortable and kind of had to drag him back out of there, and the horse didn't really appreciate it. He was between horses again around the second turn and backed himself out all the way to last, turning for home, before the horse just suddenly kind of picked it up again and started passing horses and finished 5th. Blinkers on by Gustavo Delgado, the trainer. I think what he's trying to do is obviously to keep Ferocious's attention focused forward and not so much on the horses around him, which has seemed to be an issue in the past. So I'm looking for him to run a much better race. But I think you've got the top 2, in my opinion.
I'm right with you on Ferocious. I was trying to pull up the PPs, but I'm in Georgia. And gambling is not allowed in Georgia, so I can't pull them up. I know the card at Santa Anita off by heart, but I cannot pull it up. I'm just going to go with Ferocious, and I believe he's a good horse. I know he's been working really, really well. And just watching him last summer at Saratoga, he's a big horse with a big frame. And he really looks like he started to fill out into that big giant frame of his. So I think his 3-year-old year is probably going to be his best. But as far as the other horses, I couldn't even tell you who's running.
Okay.
Georgia.
Well, next time we'll have to get you to do the podcast from someone else other than Georgia. How about that? We got 49 other states to choose from. Okay, so
now let's quickly mention some of the other horses in here, right? You got Guns Loaded, who won the Mucho Macho Man. He didn't look all that great, didn't run all that fast. You've got Tappan Street, $1 million yearling purchase from Windstar, from the Avenger Group. Oh, not the Avenger Group, but Windstar, China Horse Club, etc. The Liz Crow Group, I think. Brad Cox is the trainer, 1-for-1 lifetime. And you got a horse from Juddmonte, the Bill Mott trains, who's visually impressive in his last 2 starts, Burning Glory. So it's not a bad race. It's just short on accomplishments. I think Guns Loaded is the only, and he's not joking, are the only 2 actual stakes winners in the lineup.
Out at Santa Anita, we have the Robert B. Lewis. This was a race. Was it last year or the year before? They had 4 horses and all 4 of them were trained by Bob Baffert. It was. This year, it's not quite so bad. Bob Baffert has 3 out of the 5 horses, but he has the top 3 horses in the race. And this is just, what we're going to deal with every single week now when they have a prep, especially at Santa Anita, maybe a little bit at Oakland. Baffert's getting his stable really rolling, and he likes to use this race. He has Madaket Road, who broke his maiden last time out. Citizen Bull, the Breeders' Cup juvenile winner. Rodriguez, a horse that broke his maiden last time out by 7 lengths with a 101 buyer figure. The other 2 horses in the race are Clock Tower, Wesley Ward trains that, and a horse by the name of Valentine's Candy, who was in there for nothing other than 5th money. looking at the 3 Baffert horses, they all look good. I can't say that one, really jumps off the page. Rodriguez has the highest figure with the 101, but he's just broke his maiden going against a horse that won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile in Citizen Bull. But I'm going to drink the Rodriguez Kool-Aid. He was that impressive. That race last time out was fantastic. And he's going from a mile to another mile race. He's proven he can run the distance. And Citizen Bull, even though he won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile last year, I don't think he ever dazzled anybody. He wasn't one of these Baffert horses where can't wait to see him next year. Very, very good horse. Got a 96 buyer figure in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, but he doesn't have the seasoning. But Rodriguez is the fastest horse of the race, at least based on that last race, Randy.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the accomplished horse against his stablemate. I mean, that's really what it all boils down to. Rodriguez was very impressive, but I mean, look, Citizen Bull has been the kind of horse that seemingly has been underestimated and underappreciated for pretty much his whole career. He was the favorite in the Del Mar Futurity, but then he came back and he wasn't the favorite in the American Pharoah. He was 3-1. He went wire to wire there. He was 15-1 in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and he went wire to wire there simply because East Avenue stumbled so badly at the start. So he was fortunate enough there to be, to have the right circumstances. The interesting thing is going to be, to me, the run to the first turn at 1 mile, since they're both Baffert horses, Citizen Bull and Rodriguez. And then you've got Clock Tower in there as well, who has never been beaten to the lead in 5 lifetime starts, the last 3 of those on grass. So they're going to go with Clock Tower. It's going to be a learning experience for Citizen Bull, I think. He's shown he doesn't have to have the early lead. Rodriguez, we don't know. He's only had 2 lifetime starts. He was on the lead both times. We don't know how he will react having to sit a little bit off the pace. So I'm going to take Citizen Bull just because of that. Just because we don't know what Rodriguez is going to do if he has to rate, and the alternative would be a speed duel with Citizen Bull sitting behind them, probably all alone in third.
Well, Citizen Bull's a peddler. Martin Garcia is riding him, correct?
Yes.
Yes,
I would
correct.
imagine so, yeah. And he'll go as fast as Martin wants him to go or as slow as Martin wants to go. It's like riding a bike. He's really matured nicely and filled out nicely into his 3-year-old year. He's been working very well. Bobson putting him on the lead. We'll show that work in just a little bit of his most recent work at Santa Anita. So he's a good horse. He's underrated. I like Rodriguez. And I have a feeling that he's probably the one we want to get on. As far as who's going to be on the lead, I think Bob will just leave it up to his jocks.
So
I'm going to guess that one of Bob's will be on the lead and not Watchtower.
So who's the favorite in here?
I think it's going to be Rodriguez.
I do as well, too. Randy?
I think it's going to be Citizen Bull.
Okay. All right. Well, that is an interesting race within a race, but good to see Bob Baffert back in action, and good to see that we know he will be at the Kentucky Derby in 2025 rather than watching it from his home after Churchill made his life so difficult all these years. So Baffert has a strong hand, 3 of 5 in the Robert B. Lewis, which you can watch with Randy Moss's coverage and Jerry Bailey and the team on NBC.
Well, as mentioned, the TDN Writers Room is brought to you by XBTV, and this week's XBTV Work of the Week is the newly crowned champion 2-year-old of 2024. That is Citizen Bull, who worked 5 furlongs in 59 flat in company with Pilot Commander this past Saturday at Santa Anita. That's Citizen Bull on the rail here, and the pair posted the fastest work of 106 horses on the day at the distance. Citizen Bull, as mentioned, is a candidate to run in Saturday's Grade 2 Robert B. Lewis Stakes, going a mile at Santa Anita. We'll be right back after this message from XBTV.
Be a smarter, better with XBTV. The best horses. With thousands of exclusive morning workouts. All at your fingertips and delivered right into your inbox. Everything you need to be informed. Be smart. Bet smart with XBTV.
PA Bred, I think we've built a brand at this point.
It's excitement at every step.
Roses for Deborah just set a new track record.
On average, for the past decade, Pennsylvania paid over $28 million a year in Breeders' Awards, restricted races, and owner bonuses. Plus, PA Bred shine on the world's biggest stage. Just 3 states have bred more Breeders' Cup winners. Learn more at pabred.com.
The TDN Writers Room also brought to you by the PHBA, the Pennsylvania Horse Breeders Association. The statistics for Pennsylvania breds and all the awards are in for 2024. And congratulations to the Warriors Reward Syndicate, who owns the stallion by the same name. They led in total breeder awards in 2024, $927,000. The runner-up, Uptown Charlie Brown Stud LLC at $735,000. Their 2-year total comes in at over $1.6 million in awards. And Uptown Charlie Brown was number 1 in Stallion Awards last year. That came in at $225,000. That sounds like a lot of money to give out. It is. Pennsylvania paid awards to 354 breeders and has averaged over $28 million annually in program payouts over the last decade. You can get involved in the PA program. Just go to pabred.com/2025 stallion auction if you want to bid on 83 seasons in 7 different states. The auction ends this Thursday, Jan 30. Get on it. It ends at 9 p.m. As always, for more information, you can call the PA Bred number. You can go to the website, pabred.com, or call 610-444-1050.
Well, some of the big news last week happened off the racetrack when we had the Eclipse Awards ceremony at the Breakers in Palm Beach. Once again, congratulations to part of our TDN team, Sue Finley and Chris McGrath, who both won Eclipse Awards in media departments. The show was very well done, very tasteful. I thought Eric Asmussen, when he accepted his award for the Apprentice, was just moved. He was moved to tears, and I was moved to tears watching him and just the joy that he got out of it. So far as the votes, I mean, there's never any huge surprises in this, but this year there were a couple categories that were at least close. And Zoe, I was a Ken McPeak guy. I actually really thought he was going to win over Chad Brown. Nobody who voted for Chad Brown needs to apologize for anything with the kind of year that he had. But the numbers and the Chad Brown machine won out over McPeak. He just overwhelmed everybody with all those graded wins, purse earnings, etc. McPeak couldn't come close in those categories, but of course, Chad Brown didn't finish first and second in the Oaks and Derby on successive days. I was a little bit surprised, but congratulations to Chad Brown.
There were no wrong answers, to be perfectly honest, in that category specifically with Chad Brown and Kenny McPeak. I voted for Kenny McPeak. I think we all did here, but it was Chad Brown who wound up taking it home. At least Kenny was a finalist. Perhaps the biggest surprise for me, and this is one thing that I believe should be changed, was I thought Johannes was going to win the turf. And I really wish we had a better candidacy for horses coming over from Europe. They should make 3 starts, in my opinion. Rebels Romance beat them all, and I guess we shouldn't award mediocrity. But he didn't beat Johannes because they ran in different categories. But I firmly believe that they should have to run 3 times in North America.
Yeah, I've often said 2 is what my thing has been. But yeah, I mean, we've seen it a couple of dozen times at least in Eclipse Awards over the years since they were created back in the early 1970s, where you just have a horse come over from Europe and make 1 start, like a Goldacova or a Mies, or, you know, there's a long line of them. And then they win an Eclipse Award over some of the horses that have been running in the United States repeatedly. So I've always been a fan of making that sort of rule for Eclipse Award voters, but it's just never happened. I agree with you, Bill, about the it's a much more pleasurable ceremony to go to now. You don't have those long acceptance speeches on and on and on. And the producer of the Eclipse Awards, Amy Zimmerman, deserves all the credit for that. She's laid down the law and started playing the music a few years ago. And I think now everybody is pretty much indoctrinated to brief acceptance speeches, and it's made the whole thing a much more enjoyable situation. And about the trainer thing, look, I agree. I mean, Chad Brown had an unbelievable season. Kitty McPeak, had an accomplishment that'll go down to the history books with the Derby and the Oaks. I thought Chad was pretty classy and acknowledging that when he got to the podium to accept his award. I think the first thing that came out of Chad's mouth was, well, I finally beat Kenny McPeak in a photo, referring, of course, to Mystic Dan and Sierra Leone in the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, and I want to go back to what Zoe said. Matter of fact, my plans are to write something of this very nature this week in the Thoroughbred Daily News. Again, Rebel's Romance, he's a wonderful horse, but he ran one time in the United States. And this is nothing new. As Randy said, we've seen this, maybe 24 times compared to Johannes, who was 5 for 6, made 6 starts in North America during the year, won 5 of them, won a grade 1, and his only loss was in the Breeders' Cup Mile. It shouldn't be about just Breeders' Cup Day. It should be about your overall body of work for the year, but not what you do in Qatar and what you do in the UK or in Ireland or Dubai, Saudi Arabia, or whatsoever. So far as the North American or American Eclipse Awards, Johannes had a much more accomplished year. Then there was Carl Spackler too, who also had a terrific year with 2 grade 1s. Zoe, Randy wants 2, you want 3, I want 2 as well. I'm not going to be greedy because we'll never get it to 3. So I'm going to try to say we should have a horse has to run twice in this country in order to be eligible for the Eclipse Awards. By the way, and here's one of the ironies of this. Who's the best horse in Canada? Well, that's obviously Mora, right? So isn't she going to be the runaway Sovereign Award Horse of the Year winner in Canada this year? She won the Breeders' Cup, Affiliate Mare Turf, after all. No, she's not, because they have a rule that you have to run 3 times during the year in Canada to be eligible. She's not even eligible. So a horse from Canada will win an Eclipse Award, but not be eligible for a Sovereign Award in her own country. So that's a little bit of a messed up situation that we need to fix. Anyways, well, Gulfstream Park has been in the news lately, and not just because of the Pegasus. It's been in the news in a negative way, in a very negative way as well. Going back prior to the Pegasus, the Stronach Group, or First Racing, announced that they want to decouple, which means they will have a situation where the casino license is no longer dependent on them having live horse racing. And they also, in a closed door meeting, which our man Dan Ross got a recording of, Keith Brackpool, representing the Stronach Group / First Racing, said that if you don't work with us, that we're going to close this place in 3 years. And matter of fact, Randy, you have said all along, even if they do work with them, the land is so valuable that the 3 years, isn't that big of a carrot on the end of a stick. So they thought, I'm sure they looked like they needed to do a little bit of damage control. Aidan Butler from First Racing did Nick Luck's podcast. And then on the NBC show, Belinda Stronach, who very rarely is heard from, especially when it's, she's heard from when she's doing her job of promoting big events and that sort of thing. But on the issues of what's going on with the First Racing tracks, she did an interview on NBC on your show. A couple things, my couple takeaways. I don't think we learned anything from these things. It was a little bit disappointing. They made a case that I thought was just, I don't know, can I call it bizarre or ridiculous? This idea that Gulfstream Park's not a good place to run horse racing because it's in an urban setting. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. It's a beautiful place to run horse racing. It's not like they're running through the streets of Mumbai, India, or something like that with, cars from the 60s that haven't had, that looked like some PR person put that in her ear. But what we needed to hear was A, more details, and B, as both her and Aidan Butler said, we love racing, we're committed to racing, yada, 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 yada. Then what is the plan? Right now you have a chance to lay out a plan in front of the entire nation, tell us this is what we're going to do going forward, and this is how we're going to save horse racing in South Florida. We heard nothing of the kind. Even after those 2 interviews, it looks to me like within the next 3 years, Gulfstream Park, if not sooner than the next 3 years, will close. And we still don't know what the heck is going to happen with the future of racing in South Florida, Randy.
Yeah, here's my takeaways on everything. Okay, first of all, I don't think that behind the scenes at First Racing, there's a lot of unanimity about exactly how to portray things and timelines and things like that. I think it was very much a tactical mistake to come out with all this a week before the Pegasus World Cup, for example. And I think there were some people behind the scenes that were advising against that. My takeaways from Aidan Butler's extensive interview with Nick Luck, who asked a lot of tough questions of Aidan Butler. Aidan said that the 3-year thing that Keith Brackpool mentioned was not a corporate strategy that had been, a hard and fast discussion behind the scenes. It was more or less just a number that he kind of threw out as, an example in the middle of some acrimonious discussions among horsemen, right? Aidan Butler said it could be 3, it could be 5 years, could be 10 years. Nobody is settled on 3 years at First Racing. And my takeaway from the Belinda Stronach interview was that anybody who held any hope that Gulfstream Park would continue to race long term on this site, I think that was pretty much completely shot down by Belinda's coming up with the urban setting that it's not good for the horses to run at Gulfstream Park as sort of a justification for what First Racing is going to do. Look, it's not that horses, in my opinion, don't do well at Gulfstream Park. It's not that moving the site from Gulfstream Park is good for racing. And I think that was said as well. It's good for First Racing. It's good for the Stronach family for obvious reasons. You and I have talked about it. The land is worth almost $2 billion. What I think was encouraging, they said repeatedly, and hopefully they'll follow through with this, that they want to be part of the solution in finding another site other than the Gulfstream Park site where Major League Racing in South Florida can be continued. And I think right now that's the best we can hope for.
Yeah, there was a little glimmer of hope there. I still think that Palm Meadows, which they own, would be a pretty good place to run horse racing going into the future. So, but we still have a lot more questions than we have answers. We'll see how this plays out going down the road. But, I was just personally hoping for a little bit more of optimistic news. And, right. And look, Keith, we don't know. We're not a fly in the room in the corporate office of First Racing, but I don't know, did Keith Brackpool speak out of turn? I mean, that's kind of the question. We'll never get an answer to that, but they can't take that away. This is what the man said, that 3 years, basically, and saying, and Randy, you've been saying the same thing, that the land is too valuable. It can't continue to be used as a racetrack. Or people who are trying to run a profitable business. And we wonder what would be the case if Mr. Frank Stronach still owned the place, because he looked at things very differently than other people. But if your bottom line is about the profit, yeah, there's no chance that racing continues at Gulfstream going into the future. But let's hope that we hear from First a little bit more about what their future plans are, et cetera. Did Keith Brackpool talk out of turn or not? We'll never get an answer to that. But like you said, Randy, it's I also agree they could have just as easily done this 3 weeks ago when the feature race on the card was the, Florida Stallion Series Stakes or something like that. And it wouldn't have been caught up in all the hoopla of the Pegasus. Look, we don't have the answers, but let's just hope that one way or another, top quality racing will continue somewhere, someplace in South Florida. And we're keeping our fingers crossed, because to lose that racetrack would be a terrible, terrible thing to happen for the future of horse racing.
The TDN Writers Room also brought to you by our friends at West Point Thoroughbreds, who had some good efforts this past weekend, but experienced the old wide world of sports agony of defeat. There was the Southwest Stakes with Sandman. We talked about what happened to him at the start, and he wound up running a heck of a race to finish second behind Speed King, losing by just a length. And then in the Pegasus World Cup Turf Integration, owned by West Point, and jockey Frankie Dettori looked like they might be home free at one point. Beautiful ride by Dettori, only to see Integration run down in the closing stages by the Chad Brown-trained Spirit of St. Louis. This weekend, West Point will take a couple of shots at the Kitten's Joy Stakes on the undercard of the Holy Bull at Gulfstream Park. They have Maui Strong, and they also have Walking in Memphis. We'll be right back after this message from West Point.
All the thrills. Fraction of the bills. Experience the power of the partnership. Change your life, make new friends, and compete at the highest level of thoroughbred racing. West Point Thoroughbreds, the gold standard in racing partnerships. Visit westpointtb.com.
That's a wrap on this week's Thoroughbred Daily News Writers Room podcast. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and I also want to thank my co-hosts, Randy Moss and Zoe Cabin, along with our Gainesway Guest of the Week, Saffie Joseph Jr., and the people who work so hard behind the scenes to make this show what it is, our producers, Katie Petruniak, Sue Finley, Anthony LaRocca, and Leah LaRocca. We'll see you next week.